celebration of Shalane Flanagan as she comes to the line, breaks the tape. The joy evident as she has won her first world marathon major.
That was ESPN's John Anderson on the call of the 2017 New York City Marathon. Shalane Flanagan's finest moment. She has retired, an all-time American distance running legend. I'm Jonathan Galt. This is the Let'sRun.com Track Talk podcast. I'll be joined shortly by my co-hosts, Robert Johnson and Weldon Johnson, the co-founders of the wonderful website, Let'sRun.com. We'll also be getting to Leonard Courier, who runs the fastest debut marathon ever by an American, 2:07 over in Amsterdam. We'll talk a little bit about the news that Mark Parker is stepping down as the CEO of Nike. We'll talk about some running shoes. We tend to do that from time to time. The Vaporflies, Sean Ingle has an article in The Guardian about them. Looks like they're going to get the green light. Bridget Kosgei, NCAA cross country. We're going to talk a little bit about everything here in the middle of October. But we're going to start with Shalane. And I guess the question I'll put to you guys, we've sort of been debating this and throwing this around. Is Shalane the greatest female American distance runner of all time?
Okay, John, I'll try to answer that question here. I've been writing these articles on Sheelane on the website. I've written one, a second one's about to go up, but I've strangely found myself unwilling to take a stand. Yes or no, is she the GOAT? Which is very unlike me to not have an emphatic opinion. I'm going to have to finally say no. Sheelane had an amazing career, a wide variety of success in cross country, track, and the roads, all three surfaces. But she's clearly not the best track runner. I mean, Jenny Simpson has significantly more medals, including a gold medal. Clearly not the best cross-country runner. Lynn Jennings wins 3 in a row. And clearly not the best marathoner. Deena Kastor has won 2 marathon majors. So, you could say altogether, it's an incredibly impressive career. I personally prefer to have Joan Benoit's career over Shalene's. But the more I thought about it, and this is an article that's just about to go up on the website, I'm not even sure if Shalane Flanagan's career is actually better than Deena Kastor's. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think I agree. I actually think Deena had a better career after running the numbers. And Robert, you had a nice breakdown, but I'll tease it for our listeners here. Essentially, Olympic medals. So Flanagan's got 1, Kastor's got 1. Shalane's was a silver to Deena's bronze, but they both have an Olympic medal. World Marathon majors win. Shalane has 1. Deena has 2. She won Chicago and London. World XC medals, individual. Flanagan has 1. Kastor has 2. NCAA XC titles, Flanagan has 3, Kastor has 0. Then you get down to sort of national titles, it's mostly even. PRs, Kastor has the slower PRs on the track, but she has the faster PRs in the marathon. But to me, the big thing is that Deena won 2 world marathon majors, which is quite an accomplishment. And one of them was London, 2:19:36, American record. That's way better than any marathon Shalane ever produced. So I give Deena the slight edge because everything else is about even. I guess the 2 world cross medals is pretty impressive too. But that's where I stand. Deena by maybe a nose.
Hey, public at large doesn't give a shit about London, Chicago. Shalane Flanagan won the New York City Marathon. So I think public at large, Shalane Flanagan's the GOAT.
Wow, Weldon, that's spoken like a true New Yorker. The public at large doesn't give a shit about running at all. Like, most people can't even name Shalane Flanagan. So I don't understand why we're just saying, oh, idiots might believe this, so let's just go with the idiots. No, we're a running podcast with deep analysis of running. You just want to cater to the lowest common denominator, Weldon? I mean, come on, man.
Well, Shalane's one of, I think, 2 runners my wife could name, but she has lived in New York for 10 years. So I'm just saying, in the debate at all, people they have a recency bias. New York wins going to get more publicity. Personally, yeah. John, would you rather win Boston? You're a Boston guy. Would you rather win Boston or Chicago and London?
Well, the men's side. I mean, Chicago and London. Winning London means you're beating Kipchoge. Like, I think for the men, I think I'd probably have both. For Shalane, there's no if it meant I could beat Kipchoge, I think I'd have Chicago and London. But I do get, Boston. That's if I could win one major. I mean, that's probably the one I'd choose. I don't know. What do you think, Robert?
I'm very disturbed here. Weldon's lived in New York for 6 months. I guess he did live there a few years ago as well, and now he's Mr. Arrogant New Yorker saying she won New York, therefore she's the GOAT. He says no one gives a shit about London or Chicago. I mean, no one gives a shit about New York if you live in London. London is clearly the number one marathon in the world now. Now, the weird thing is I would have to go back. We weren't covering this in the great depth that we were. What year was that? 2006 when she won London? Like, was London the best marathon in the world back then or not? I don't really remember. But 2:19 back then was pretty much competitive with anything. I guess Sheelane did beat Mary Katani, who was quite a good runner. Their careers, it's scary how similar they are. USA Outdoor titles, 5. It's crazy. Everything we're going through is pretty much the same, except Dina has an extra World XC medal, an extra marathon major.
She never won NCAA cross, though.
Yeah. To me, the NCAA cross is kind of important. I mean, Dina was 4 times top 12 in NCAA cross, but never won it. I like Shalene's. Maybe I prefer to have. Which would I rather be right now, Sheelane or Dina? I'd rather be Sheelane. Sheelane. Is it Sheelane or Sheelane? What am I?
Shalane. I can't believe she's just retired from the sport, and Robert still can't pronounce her name correctly.
I was just thinking the same thing.
So I would rather be Sheelane just simply because, hey, she's doing a broadcasting career. I like doing broadcasting. She's more prominent right now, but it doesn't mean that she had the better career. It's pretty hard to distinguish between the two.
Yeah, Robert, she's living your dream. She's coaching the Bowerman Track Club and she's doing commentary at some of these races. So,
well, let's talk about that though, because and I don't want to, totally disparage her career, but would she have won a world marathon major without the backing of Nike? That's number one. She won that race by what? I think 59 seconds. Are the shoes worth a minute? So do we put an asterisk next to a world marathon major? I mean, obviously there's I guess when you're a woman, having your period is part of just nature. I mean, that was also lucky at the American Tanning. She did win it. It's amazing. But also, I was thinking about this. I think Sheelane is so great, and she's really raised the game. I mean, when she went to Bowerman, they were more a men's group. Now they're a women's group. The women are leading the way. She's going to coach. It's fantastic to see her involved in the sport. But yet again, we're going to have a Nike employee broadcasting on these national networks, which I think is a total conflict of interest. But the second thing I thought about is all the damage that Nike, yes, they pump up the sport, and without them, we can't imagine the sport. But think about all the damage they've done. Is Jerry Schumacher, who I respect a great deal, Sheelane, who I respect a great deal, but they silently sit at this company while the guy that Jerry used to be in business with is now being banned from the sport for 4 years. So, to Shaylene's credit, we've got to give her credit for this, though. I'm saying she's going to go work for the Empire and take the evil Empire and take the money for all these years. Sheelane, as a Nike sponsored athlete,
Shalane, Robert. It's S-H-A, not S-H-A-Y. Shalane.
Shalane, excuse me. Shalane, y'all remember this? When she said, we don't know what to believe about the NOP, there's an ongoing investigation about it. So she's got some integrity. So I was a little bit worried, she's joining them. Is she just going to sing the corporate Nike shill? But hopefully she keeps her voice as a coach moving forward.
In terms of the public at large, the GOAT discussion is done with the public at large. And as John said, maybe the public at large doesn't know shit. So maybe the average runner at large, I think right now for sure they're going to side with Sheelane. But, 10 years from now, Shalane's going to be more prominent. She's doing TV and all this other stuff. And I guess maybe that's not fair. Some people get mad that Catherine Switzer gets all the credit for running Boston instead of
Bobby Gibb.
The best don't always get the most credit, but Shalane's, it's not like she's unmerited in this discussion of being the GOAT.
No, absolutely not. She certainly deserves to be in the discussion. I think one thing as well, Robert was sort of, I wouldn't say you were discrediting, but you were saying, should we give an asterisk to her marathon major win? I think the thing is, though, when you look at women like Sheelane and also like Des Linden, Des's motto was keep showing up. I think that's kind of what, if you're a top American marathoner, that's what you need to do. And like Jordan Hussein needs to keep doing this, keep showing up. Because mostly, if you're running against the top Kenyans, you're usually going to be an underdog. No one expected Sheelane to win that race. Remember in 2017, London, Mary Katani had run 2:17:01. She looked like, the next thing she was going to try to do was break Radcliffe's record. She was viewed as completely untouchable heading into that New York race. But like you said, she had a period. It was an off day for her. And that's what you got to do. Sheelane, to her credit, took advantage by running a fantastic race. Her close in that race was phenomenal. She was just reeling off, 5:10s or sub 5:10s. But I think some of these Americans, to win a major marathon, you need to be prepared to take that moment when it comes, because if she's running Mary Keitany, the one that showed up last year in New York and crushed everyone over the second half, she's not coming close. And we saw that because they raced each other. She got smoked. But if you run well to your best of your ability and the other person doesn't run well, that's when you can win.
Yeah, I saw a couple people on Twitter didn't like that Robert mentioned Keitany had her period when Shalane won New York. But Shalane still had a fabulous final 5 miles and crushed her by a minute. Robert originally in the article was mentioning, that she wore the Vaporflies. And I'm like, well, we don't need everything in there. The record books will always show she ran 2017 New York. Now, yeah, runner insiders, we can debate, how she won it. The field outside of Keitany was not that strong. I guess Kiplagat was in there too, but that's the thing with these marathons. A lot of times there's only 3 or 4 top people, 2 or 3 top people, and one of them has an off day and your chances are much better, but you got to show up and you got to be very, very good. And she brought her A+ game that day.
Well, right. And since it's sort of arbitrary about whether you win the World Marathon Major or not, kind of who's there, who has a good day or not. I mean, that would be one reason to actually go to the track PRs and give Sheelane the edge there. She's faster at 3,000, 1,500, 5,000, and 10,000, although I guess contrasting that, Dina does have the edge at the half marathon, and her marathon national record still stands. So, when we're talking about who's in the New York field, we don't even remember who's in the two. That's what I'm saying. I haven't done the research to go back to see who was in the 2006 London field or the Chicago field.
Right.
When Dina won those.
I mean, it's interesting though. Well, yeah, pointed out Edna Kiplagat. I mean, that field had the reigning Boston champ and the reigning London champ. That's usually, did they run to the same level they did that spring? No, but that's, you can't blame New York. It's not like there was a field that was set up for Shalane to win or anything. One other thing in this whole discussion of the GOAT, just want to bring this up. A Message Board poster brought this to our attention, and they just posted under the handle of Lynn and Alice Jennings. And I think we got to give some respect. Shalane, a Massachusetts legend. Lynn Jennings, also a Massachusetts running legend. This is her resume. 3rd at the Olympics in 10,000 in 1992. 2 medals at World Indoors. 3-time World Cross Country champion. I mean, that's just remarkable, those things. Please tell me the next time an American is going to even medal at World Cross. That's the thing, and that Shalane gets respect for as well. She medaled in 2011 against a very strong field. The top American finisher at World XC last year, 33rd place. And you look at the recent domination of the Kenyans and the Ugandans and the Ethiopians of that event. I don't know when the next time we're going to see an American medal at World Cross. It might be a while. So Shalane to get third and for Lynn Jennings to win 3 times is pretty outstanding.
That's true, John, but it's really hard. One thing that makes it hard if we're going to compare, Lynn Jennings, and again, I mentioned Joan, but Weldon's talking about the public at large. Come on. You ask the public at large, hey, do you want to be the Olympic marathon champion like Joan Benoit Samuelson, the first ever, or do you want to be Sheelane Flanagan? They're all going to pick Joan Benoit, I think. I think that's just a much bigger deal, winning the Olympics versus winning New York, particularly the first women's Olympic marathon. So, but, one thing about, people don't want me to mention facts like, she had a period and that's why she says she didn't do well. We also got to give credit though. Shalane's career head-to-head marathon record against Mary Keitany, I think, is 2-2. She beat her in her debut. When Sheelane debuted in New York, she only lost to Kiplagat by 20 seconds. She did beat Mary Keitany. You can look it up until it stops, John, but I think it's 2-2. But one thing about Lynn Jennings, John, one other thing you failed to mention, fellow Princeton alum like yours truly, she won in 1990, 1991, and 1992. No African woman had ever won a World Cross. People forget how sexist and it was, really. The first African woman did not win a World Cross Country title until 1994. So it's just a totally different era. It's the era when, the Bill Rogers and the Frank Shorters and the Alberto Salazars of the world were dominating on the men's side. And, with the professionalization of the sport and the Africans coming in, particularly on the women's side, it's just so much harder now than it was back then to win one of those titles. So, Lynn had a fantastic career. Yes, her career accomplishments probably excel Shalane's, but the level of competition wasn't the same.
Yeah, I'm just glad we could bring some nuance to this discussion as opposed to just someone blurting out, oh, she won New York, she must be the best ever. I'm just glad we had that discussion.
Oh, Tom Brady won a Super Bowl. He's the best ever.
And then he won 5 more. I think we can, if you want to argue that someone's better than Tom Brady, I just please go right ahead.
Before we move to our next topic, John, I'll let you come up with that next topic. We need to give a shout out to the sponsors. And I think the sponsor this week should be the Let'sRun.com shoes site. Let'sRun.com/shoes. We have the best reviews. We also have the best prices. So if you need shoes right now, go on there, click on the link, purchase them, and we will make some money. If you don't need shoes right now, tell us what shoes you're running in, what you think of them, and review them to help somebody else out. Let'sRun.com/shoes. And if you need to reach us, 844-538-LET'S-RUN. 844-538-7786.
Wait, remember the tip jar? We got to get back on that. At World Championships, it was 2 a.m. We said we give all tips to John. There's a tip jar at the bottom of the podcast. If your podcast app, some podcast apps automatically, you guys already know how to tip. But I should pull up my phone right now and see how to do this. I think you can give like weekly. Maybe people should do weekly. We got a few tips, Robert. We got to update John on how much money he's getting. But once again, people, all tips to Jonathan Gault on the podcast.
I was starting to worry. Either we weren't getting tipped or Weldon was just pocketing it for himself because I haven't seen any of this.
Some people gave $10, and then I thought about it. Would you rather get $10 or someone say, hey, I'm going to give like a coffee a month, like, $4 a month?
Oh, yeah. I would say the monthly donation. That's the way to go. While we're talking about pumping up our own egos, how about you guys rate and review our podcast as well? Share it to your friends. Maybe post it on your social media. Do you know like a running nerd who doesn't listen to us? Let them know. I mean, you're going to get the real authentic views about the sport of track and field. And let's pivot now. This story, I didn't even expect this to be a story 1 week ago because I didn't know it was happening. But Leonard Courier, 2:07:56 in Amsterdam, the fastest debut marathon by an American man of all time. And he only got 11th place in the race, which shows you how deep Amsterdam was. But I mean, this is crazy. The guy ran worlds on the track 2 weeks before. He got 13th in the 10K. And then the Amsterdam elite list trickles out and he's on it. And I'm like, Leonard Courier, USA. And then what I was thinking initially is like, you know how there are people like Josvat Boyd or I think Emmanuel Bohr, where they're like one who runs for Kenya and one who runs for America. I'm like, maybe there's another Leonard Courier in Kenya and they've confused it and put his name in, as part of the US in the entry list. No, it's actually Leonard Courier of the WCAP, Iona College alumni. And yeah, 2:07:56. I mean, I'm not totally shocked given that he was a sub 60 half marathoner. He's an Olympian in the 10,000 who's run 27. Look up his PR right here, but it's 27 low, 27:20 for 10,000. And he was running in the Vaporflies. So are you guys surprised, impressed? What are your reactions to Leonard Courier and his 2:07?
I mean, it is the fastest ever by an American for a debut. Perhaps we shouldn't be surprised, right? He's run under an hour for the half. Brian Hall did that when he was a natural-born marathoner. You don't have to be a sub-27 guy to be a very good marathoner. The marathoning world's kind of crazy now, right? He runs that. As Americans, we're all super excited. But he gets 11th in the race. It just shows these races, some of the non-majors, they don't give big appearance fees, but they just invite a bunch of people. And, I mean, the game is shifting. Then you have the new shoes. So you want to take a couple minutes off for that, a minute off for that. I mean, just slightly changes how I view some of these marathon times. But very good run. I mean, you could argue him and Rupp are the favorites for the trials right now.
Yeah, John, I'm not surprised by it at all. I mean, he's a sub 60-minute half marathoner. I'm really curious. And by the way, Leonard, if you're listening to this podcast or Scott Simmons, your coach, we've been trying to reach you since before the race. Try to get out to get the scoop to see if he was actually, I'm really curious to find out if he was training for this race and sort of the 10,000 was just like an afterthought, or was the 10,000 the focus and he just hopped on and ran the marathon. That makes it even more impressive. But, he went out in like basically 2:06 pace and then faded a little bit. So it doesn't surprise me. I mean, he's a better 10,000 meter runner than somebody like Scott Fauble or Jared Ward. So I would think that he would be better than them at the marathon. And I think that really the question becomes is how many of these people, is anyone else going to move up to the marathon for the trials? Because I think that any of these 10,000, these 27-minute low guys that were born in Kenya that are now running for the U.S. team and the 10,000 could be factors in the marathon.
Well, I mean, there's only one guy really you're pegging with that, and that's Chadwick Kipchirchir, right, Robert? Unless there's someone else who I'm not thinking of.
No, right. And I don't expect him to do it because he's never run a half marathon before, so he hasn't shown any indication that he even wants to run a marathon. If he hasn't done a half, he doesn't have a qualifier for the Olympic trials right now. So that would be the only other one really, on that front that would be, I would say, very scaring if you're, Jared Ward or Scott Fauble or one of these guys that thinks you have a good shot. But to me, I think that, there's a thread on the message board, someone saying there's a new favorite. I think they were calling Career the new favorite for the Olympic trials, and then saying that Rupp was second. I would think that Career and Rupp would be, near locks for the team.
No. I'm not calling Career a near lock because he ran 207.56 in Amsterdam. Jared Ward and Scott Fauble both ran 209 in Boston, which I think, and they also didn't do it in the Vaporflies. Now, obviously, they won't be racing in the Vaporflies at the trials either, but I think that those two performances are fairly close. Like 209 on a tougher course in Boston in a championship style marathon. I think that's pretty close to a 207 high in Amsterdam. And so I wouldn't call Career a lock. He's also only done one marathon in his career. Like Jared Ward was sixth in the 2016 Olympics. We got to remember that. So I think it makes it a lot more interesting because I now view there's sort of four guys who are cut above the rest of the field and there's only three spots. But I also don't think that, I'm sure there are some guys who just ran 210 in Chicago or some other ones who might be able to come up and grab one of those spots. But to me, the favorite is still Galen Rupp. I made the mistake in 2016 with his track resume and everything he'd done. I still was like, I'm going to pick, I think I picked Ritz for the win, which, looking back is insane because Ritz I think he's just been too injury prone the last few years. But I didn't pick Galen Rupp to win that time, even though he was clearly the most talented runner in the field. I'm picking Galen Rupp to win this Olympic trials right now. Like, unless we get word that he's like still injured and he can't come back, he has to be viewed as the favorite.
John, 209 is not the same as 207, particularly when he went out in 63 flat. And yes, Jared Ward wasn't wearing Vaporflies, but he's wearing Saucony's version of it. This guy's a professor. I think he's got his own version of a shoe that should be banned. And let's talk about this. The breaking news, I think it's out yesterday. Was it Sean Engel that had it, John? That the IAAF may just be allowing any shoe from now on that's not mechanicized. That's fine if they want to do that going forward. The main thing I would like to see is a rule that is clear, number one, and number two, that is enforced. So we need to know what the rules are going forward. But then how are you going to ban people like Oscar Pistorius with fake legs? We have wheelchair racing. They don't race the able-bodied runners. I think there needs to be some sort of, I don't know. I'm not really sure if I really like that rule. But even if that is the rule, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't go back to 2016. I'm dead serious about this. We need to validate those Olympic marathon results. We need to validate them. The shoes were illegal, and it was a huge advantage, and it's wrong. It greatly impacted that race. The 2016 Olympic marathon results need to be invalidated. The Nike shoes were against the rules as written, and nothing's been done about it. Way bigger deal than doping.
Come on, Robert. That's ridiculous. I understand the point. I think really the shoes were an unfair advantage in Olympics because nobody had access to that technology, but they're not going to go back and invalidate Olympic results because of shoes from 3 years ago. But going forward, the Sean Engel article is pretty troubling to me in some ways. We can't just allow anything goes because we don't want athletes winning races because they have shoes that no one else has. This is not car racing. This is not something else. We're trying to, and track and field has always been about who is the fastest, not who has the best technology. So if they're going to allow any technology for shoes, they need to make some rule about the commercial availability of the shoes. The shoe has to be commercially available, say, for 6 months before it can be used in competition. And that way, other athletes can decide if they want to use that shoe and whether it's fair. It might make more sense to just put a limit on stack heights or something like that on these shoes to level the playing field. But we're going to have separate record books. Swimming had these swimsuits for a while, and they decided to ban them. And I guess we need to look into more why swimming went that route. But we don't want people winning races because they have shoes that no one else has. And if rules aren't in place, ensuring a level playing field, even if any type of technology is allowed, but that you have to know what the technology is and available to different shoe companies or different runners, at least they have access to it. Come on. This is very troubling.
I think there are 2 points here, Robert, that I want to address. And one is, stripping the Olympic medals. I mean, this might be your least popular take of all time, Robert. You're really trying to get Eliud Kipchoge stripped of his Olympic gold medal. I really don't think you're going to get any support of that. But then second part of this is Sean Engel put it up in his article as well, which is really good. You should read it on The Guardian. about the reasonably available to all thing. We have had Nike athletes racing in prototypes this entire track season. Sifan Hassan broke the world record for the mile in prototypes. Laura Muir has broke British records in prototypes. I can't count how many athletes sponsored by Nike came through the mix zone wearing their prototype spike at the World Championships. I don't understand if IAAF has a rule that shoes have to be a type of shoe has to be really reasonably available to all. How do prototypes fit that? I guess they're saying they're actually spikes and that all spikes are available to all. It needs to be clarified if you're going to, you need to enforce it or don't have the rule at all.
Yes, I guys. Okay, fine. Don't go back and validate it, but that's a bigger deal than a lot of these minor drugs that people are taking on. I don't really expect it to happen, but I'm saying it should happen. But I think we're all in agreement on the shoes. The rules need to be clear. They need to be enforced. And the clear thing is, we all three of us agree, they need to be commercially available. The rules should be simple. For an Olympic year, if it's not out on sale by January 1st of that year, you can't wear them, period. End of story. At the beginning of the year, whatever, the companies announce what shoes are for sale for that year. Those are the shoes you can race in. And maybe you need to indicate at the start line what shoe you're in. And there we go. Because this is becoming kind of absurd.
I just want to say, though, Nike is not the only company that has had its athletes race in prototypes. Des Linden won the 2018 Boston Marathon in Brooks prototypes. Parker Stinson at the Chicago Marathon this year didn't even know what kind of shoe he was racing in. So there are other companies that do this. Nike is obviously the most prominent and their athletes the most famous at the moment, but every company needs to abide by this if we're going to enforce it.
Well, I've said that. I've never had a problem with prototypes like you guys are saying because the rule is type of shoe. So if you just have another normal spike like everybody else, it's not a big deal if they've made it extra wide for you or something like that. But if you have a totally different shoe, that no one else has, then it's a bigger issue. And that's why I've been talking about the Saucony shoes.
It's also a bit different, though, for the other shoe companies, John, when you're playing catch up and trying to copy someone else's technology. So but then if someone drops a completely new technology for the next Olympics and nobody has, Adidas has one. I mean, it looks like in retrospect now, I think the Boost foam was giving Adidas athletes an advantage. And maybe we didn't realize that, or who knows, maybe they should have marketed that better. It wasn't as big an advantage as this new technology, but the IAAF would never let someone throw a special javelin that no one else had access to. So for shoes, we need a level playing field. We don't want people winning because they have a drug no one has access to, or because they have shoes no one has access to. So, and I personally would like a consistent record book. They don't juice the baseballs and change different baseballs. I mean, or I guess they have, and there's some concern about that.
They do juice the baseballs.
Well, I know, and a lot of purists are upset about that. Golf, there are huge limits on like the golf technology, what can be in the balls and what can be in the clubs. The power is still coming from the person hitting the ball, so people are like, oh, it's still coming from their legs, blah blah blah. But shoes are kind of taking a different role, and maybe we want to have that. But I would have no problem if we went back to a lower stack height rule.
Okay, but here's my issue. You guys, Robert's solution was anything that's not available on January 1st of that year is not allowed to compete in. Weldon said 6 months commercially available. Well, let's play that example out. Let's see Nike right now has some super technology that we haven't even thought of yet that gives you 10% running economy gains. They debut this shoe January 1st, 2020. Their athletes are allowed to wear it because it's been commercially available. But no other company even knows about this, and they're all scrambling to respond, and they can't even get a shoe that's available to competition until January 1st, 2021, because that's what the rules say. I mean, is that fair? Because under your guidelines, that will be allowed.
No, if they want to wear the Nike shoes in the race, they should get permission from their own sponsor to wear them.
Right, and also I almost feel like
you just feel like that'll happen. Adidas isn't going to let their top runners run Nike shoes in the Olympic marathon and say, sorry, our shoes aren't good enough. That's why they wore Nike shoes.
Then I guess it's like race car running. You should have picked a better sponsor.
That's the problem. Is that what we want our sport to be? No, we want the sport to be about who's the best runner. So, John, there's a couple issues here. One, should you be allowed to patent some of this technology? You could say if the technology is going to be used in competition, it cannot be patented. I mean, you could have people say, oh, that's crazy, but commercial advantage and fair competition are completely separate, different things. Or maybe there could be some rule, I don't know, you're allowed to just take the shoe and put your own logo on it. I mean, I'm sure that's a trademark issue, but mark them up, put your own logo on it. I don't know, is that an issue? where do we draw the line here? I mean, Kobe Bryant, Nike athlete, and he wears whatever. I guess Nike's now the NBA sponsor. I don't even know. People wear different stuff, the shoes, whatever. I mean, so in the past, everyone wore the shoe of their sponsor. Maybe they won't in the future. I mean, like, we just assume these things have to, the commercial interest and fair play interest don't have to align. But I'm most concerned about fair play. And I think the 6-month rule for fair play is fine, assuming people will just be allowed, their shoe companies, Mizuno let their athletes, the Atlanta Track Club athletes, wear Nike shoes. So that's why I think you should put some limit on the technology. But where you draw that, maybe that's too complicated and these people can't figure that out. And just because one article was written saying that this committee may allow it doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be the case. There could be more outrage, and who knows.
Well, I trust Sean Ingles' reporting, but here's the thing.
The committee hasn't met yet. I mean, right? So they could change their mind.
It's a complex issue. I think that's the thing we need to say here. The IAAF does not have an easy job. It's not just like, oh, do this and everything's fair again. It's typical. There's a lot of balancing interests. And, in the NFL, I don't know any athlete who's sponsored by an apparel company or a shoe company who doesn't actually wear those shoes in competition when they're allowed to. Like Tom Brady, he's an Under Armour athlete. The NFL, all the NFL gear is Nike, but his shoes are always Under Armour in the games. And I think that's I don't think he'd just say, oh yeah, these shoes, Nike makes better quarterback shoes, I'm going to wear those. No, you have duty to your sponsor. So there's a lot of conflicting interests here.
I mean, it's kind of interesting, right, though, because in the past, sure, some people had their shoes and more athletes wore certain shoes than others. But I think by and large, we would have said, yeah, you're wearing a track spike. There's not that much difference. No one's at a competitive disadvantage because of who their sponsor is. And this could be the first time people are sort of saying that. So the sport's at a new era. I think most fans don't want that. They don't want someone winning because of what company somebody's sponsored by. The shoe companies obviously want that. But where do they go with this? First and foremost, they need a level playing field.
All right, well, let's move on a little bit here. Speaking of shoe companies, we got some news earlier this week. Mark Parker, the CEO of Nike, is stepping down in January of 2020. I think he did an interview where he said it wasn't related to the Salazar NOP controversy, but I do find it very interesting timing. The Wall Street Journal had reported Sarah Germano on Twitter said, he hadn't given any indication this was coming. It seemed like he wanted to be there for a few more years at least. And now, just weeks after a scandal rocks the company, Mark Parker's stepping down.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder, you can say it's not related. He's going to stay chairman of the board. He's still going to be involved. He's going to get, someone told me, he'll still get his bonus and all this stuff. So financially, I mean, the guy's obviously well set for life. But, it might just be easier for Nike. Hey, you step aside. You're still very actively involved. Someone's going to replace you anyway. We just don't have to answer these questions anymore. And he's like, yeah, cool. I don't care.
Or it could just have nothing to do with it at all. I mean, Weldon says that the public doesn't care about London or Chicago. Do you think the public really cares about Alberto Salazar? I mean, I did talk to that rich millionaire that I know who said he would sell his Nike stock because he thought it showed poor judgment of Mark Parker stock. So maybe a few people like him do care, but I don't think the average person I guess it was on page 2 of the Wall Street Journal. So maybe some of them know about it. But this is, again, kind of like the bias of the Shalane Flanagan recent win. Why is anyone talking about Kevin Plank of Under Armour? The 47-year-old co-founder, he's stepping aside. He's been the CEO for 23 years. He's going to kind of move to the Phil Knight role and become just the chairman of the board. That was announced this week. No one's repping Tom Brady, Baltimore baby, Under Armour. Okay,
well, yeah, because they didn't just have their highest profile training group, that dissolved and the head coach banned for 4 years. I agree. I'm guessing it probably, the Salazar thing I'm sure didn't help, but I doubt that, that was the primary reason. It will be interesting though. John Donahoe is the new CEO coming in. Will he continue funding Salazar's appeal? Will anything change from that respect? I think that'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see what happens on that appeal. That's huge because if Nike doesn't fund that, then there's no way that appeal is going to go forward, and it's going to cost millions of dollars, the appeal. And we've gotten some information on the appeal. If they do the appeal, and I think Salazar's appeal would have had to have been filed a day or two ago. Now, that's often not released for a few weeks. So, but that decision should have been made, I think, this week at some point, according to the rules. If the appeal is filed, what we've learned is that it's going to be a de novo appeal, which means that everything is argued again. So it's basically a brand new case. You're talking millions. They're not just like appealing a certain part of the case. They're going to argue the whole case again before CAS.
Which is crazy because the initial case took 2 years to adjudicate. Salazar is currently banned. His ban expires in September 2023. So it could end up, even if he gets validated, it could be until 2021 or something, and he's already served half his ban.
I mean, I've heard some appeals have lasted longer than the appeal, than the ban. But this will be interesting, right? Because in a U.S. court, if you appeal, you have to overturn an error at the other level. This is a new trial, essentially. So USADA could try to get them for things that they lost in the first round. Alberto could try to get everything gone, obviously. But Nike spent millions of dollars defending him.
Well, we assume. We don't know how much they spent.
John, there's no question, 7 figures. I heard maybe 5 to 10 million. Say even $1 million. Think how much that goes for distance running in the United States. And now they're going to double down on the appeal, which is fine. That's their right. But this John Donahue guy, it's interesting, right? Because Nike has dropped the ball consistently on the anti-doping front. They could have been a pioneer, a leader. And if you go back all the way up to Athletics West, they've never really stood out as a leader for clean sport. And is it Donahue or Ho? You said Ho, John.
It's H-O-A. It'd say H-O-E if the last 3 letters of his last name. I assume it's Donahoe.
Donahoe. I mean, he's got an opportunity here, right? What is Nike, at the very least, if they want to appeal, what about Alberto Salazar giving prescription drugs to athletes, off-label prescription drugs to his athletes? He's not a doctor. That's a huge problem. It's a liability issue. Is there any sanctioning there? Has there been any discipline? Nike's announced nothing. The Rosas, they still fund the Rosas groups. There have been multiple positive tests. Why isn't Nike holding its athletes to a higher standard? God, they could do so much for clean sport. They do so much for cutting edge sport, but clean sport they could do.
Well, there's our weekly Alberto Salazar quota. We've hit that. Move on.
No, John. I think we're not done with Parker.
Okay.
There's a thread on Let's Run. Did you guys know Mark Parker ran at Penn State?
I only learned this about 2 days ago.
So we asked what type of runner was Mark Parker at Penn State. I didn't even know he's a distance runner. I heard his wife was a good runner. That's what I'd always heard. And our very own George Malley, one of the moderators, George admits to using steroids for a brief time, as they all say.
As a member of the Nike Oregon Project, he admitted to being on steroids.
He wasn't part of the Oregon Project, Robert. Come on.
You mean Athletics West?
Excuse me, Athletics West.
I asked on this thread what type of runner he was, and George is you didn't know? I ran with him at Penn State. And essentially, George claims that Parker was sort of the total walk-on guy, technically really not on the team, who just was hanging on and whatnot. And I think to me, that sort of explains some stuff. That type of guy, I mean, we'd all be very impressed with Alberto Salazar, but that guy might be really geeked out by Alberto Salazar, because I was very curious about the language that Parker used in these emails about the doping experiment with the son. With Dr. Brown, he's it'd be curious how much male topical hormone could trigger a positive test. And I'm who uses language like that? But if you're kind of wanting to be in the cool crowd competitively, and you're Alberto Salazar's doctor is sending this language, you might mimic the language back. Because I think in day-to-day usage, no one uses that language. So this sort of, for me, supported the idea that, Parker wasn't involved in anything nefarious.
Who uses that language? A scientist uses the language. Parker I assume he was some sort of engineering geek nerd. Didn't he invent the Nike Air shoe, and that's how he became the CEO? I'm seeing results here on the Let's Run message board from the Penn State. Now they have their course now is more than 5 miles. It's 5.1 miles or 5.2. I don't know if it's still like that, but he was next to last place in 3012. So if he's some engineering geek, I mean, he might be using that type of language. But yeah, I do think it could explain a lot. You're barely on the team, you're excited to be on the team, and now you're working with Alberto Salazar. And sort of, my understanding is, John Capriati technically was Alberto's boss, but John Capriati's office is in the Alberto Salazar building. So how does anyone hold Alberto Salazar responsible for anything? Nobody really could do that there except for Phil Knight himself.
Now I think, have we satisfied our Salazar quota? We all okay to move on here, gentlemen. Let's talk awards season. It's still a ways away in the film industry, but, track season's over for running, so I think it's time to talk some awards. We've got the World Athlete of the Year award nominees announced, and there's 10 men, 10 women. So, actually, maybe it's 11. I don't know. I'll read through the nominees here. Here are the males: Donovan Brazier, Christian Coleman, Joshua Cheptegei, Timothy Cheruiyot, Stephen Gardner, Sam Kendricks, Eliud Kipchoge, Noah Lyles, Daniel Stahl, Christian Taylor, Karsten Warholm. Do you guys have strong opinions? Out of that list, who should be the 2019 IAF World Athlete of the Year?
I think that for the men, it has to be either Warholm or Gardner. Weren't both of them undefeated in their event? Both of them did exceptionally well. I've got to go with Warholm. I think he was the history's number 2 fastest all time, or number 3 all fastest all time. What was wrong with this season?
I agree with you 100%, Robert. I think Warholm is my answer. Undefeated, number 2 all time at 46.92, world champion. He was the Euro indoor champion as well, which is at 400 meters flat, which was really impressive. 45.0 there. So he's my pick. But I think, just give some shout outs. I mean, some of these guys did have phenomenal seasons. I mean, Joshua Cheptegei won World XC and the 10K title at Worlds. That was incredible. Timothy Cheruiyot, essentially one of the most dominant 1500 meter seasons we've ever seen. He lost his opening 1500, and then that was it. And then Eliud Kipchoge, I mean, if you want to, I don't know how much credit you want to give to Ineos 159 Challenge, but obviously that was super impressive. And then in London earlier this year, he set the course record and ran 2:02.37. He won last year. I don't think he's going to win again, but
I'm giving him no credit for an exhibition, 0 credit for that. I mean, yeah, Cheptegei also, John, won the Diamond League 5000, right? I mean, he had a great year.
So I would say finalists, there's 3 finalists. I think they probably go with Warholm. I think Warholm, Cheruiyot, Cheptegei is a pretty good 3 finalists right there.
Yeah, I feel like Gardner, even though he's undefeated, he probably won't get it. Cheptegei sort of discount the Diamond League 5,000 win. I think that was kind of fluke, but he did win it, and he won the 10,000 and he won cross. So that's pretty tremendous. Did Kipchoge win in 2017 as well with the breaking 2 thing or not, John?
No, he didn't win that year. He won in 2018 when he broke the actual world record.
Yeah, I feel like Kipchoge shouldn't get it. I mean, both runs were great, but for the breaking 2 thing, I mean, the betting odds were that he would make this accomplishment. So most people thought he would do what he would do. What would, I don't know, someone else do under those conditions? I mean, obviously he's the best marathoner in the world, but like, I don't know if that was his max or not, because there's all these other variables at play and it's an exhibition. So I don't think someone should be rewarded with Athlete of the Year for an exhibition event, especially when we've already shown, that boundary could essentially be broken. We thought it was impossible a couple years ago, and now we're like, wait, we removed enough variables that it's actually not nearly as hard as we thought.
One of the biggest variables that they still have kept the same is Eliud Kipchoge. We've shown it's possible for him. We haven't shown it's possible for anyone else.
Kenenisa Bekele just ran 2:01.41. I mean, I guess he almost ran 2 minutes faster than that, right?
Over 2 minutes faster.
But that's the problem with these shoes. It's really sort of messed up the record books, and I see why swimming went back, but it sounds like track may not want to mess with this. Nike supports probably more federations than anybody, so people talk about, unconscious bias, and Paula Radcliffe has an article out, I think now in the Telegraph, and she defends herself from claims to bias and this sort of stuff and the doping stuff and being a Nike shill, which I don't think she is. I mean, she's spoken out about Gatlin and others in the past, but like, if somebody pays you your federation a lot of money, you just might it's human nature to be inclined to them. I'm not saying that's a bad thing or anything, but so interesting to see where this shapes out in the next 6 months.
All right. And we've got women's nominees. This might be the most competitive list I've ever seen for women. Like, it's going to be very hard to pick. And I'll list off the names here: Beatrice Chepkoech, Shelly-Ann Fraser-Price, Katarina Johnson-Thompson, Sifan Hassan, Brigid Kosgei, Maria Lasitskene, Malika Mahambo, Dalila Muhammad, Salwa Eid Nasser, Helen Obiri, Yulima Rojas. I mean, here are the women who I don't even think have a real chance of winning it. Is Chepkoech, who is basically undefeated, almost unbeatable steeplechase world champion. Shelly-Ann Fraser-Price, who ran 10.71 and won the worlds in the 100. And Salwa Eid Nasser ran 48.14, probably the fastest non-Eastern Bloc time of all time. Helen Obiri, world cross and world champion on the track. I don't think any of those women are even going to be in the top 3, because you've got Sifan Hassan, broke the mile world record, broke the 5K world record on the roads, and won the world titles in the 15 and the 10K. Utterly ridiculous. Bridget Kosgei won London, the most competitive marathon of the year, in 2018, and then crushed the world record to run 2:14.04 in Chicago. And I don't think either of those should be the winner because Dalila Muhammad broke the world record in the 400-meter hurdles not once, but twice, including in the World Championship final. I think Dalila Muhammad's the winner, but where do you guys stand on this? I think this is one of the most competitive fields I've ever seen.
Wow, John. It's funny. When the list came out as before Chicago, and I'm like, Sifan Hassan. I didn't even think about it. I didn't really think about Dalila Muhammad for some reason. I just brain fart. But then once you started reading them again, I'm like, okay, Kosgei has to get it. She just crushed the world record in the marathon. Like, it's so sick. I don't know. I think all three are very worthy. I mean, you can make an argument for all three. But I think, it's between those three for sure.
Brojo, we need your hot take here. Set us straight.
I think Kosgei's performances, the world record is on an absolute scale the most impressive. Like, she beat a world record that had stood. How long had the 400 hurdle world record lasted that Muhammad broke?
Actually, the same amount of time. It was 2003 was when both the marathon and the 400 hurdles records were set. Okay.
I guess I'd be inclined to give it to Muhammad simply because I think there's less likelihood that she's doping. She did the world record twice. And if we're breaking a 16-year-old record, but she wasn't undefeated like Kosgei.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, Dalila Muhammad lost 2 races. She lost 2 Diamond Leagues, including the Diamond League final to Sydney McLaughlin. And Bridget Kosgei, if you look at her, what more do you want from her? She crushed everyone to win London and had the fastest second half of a marathon ever, sub 67. And then she runs 2:14 in Chicago, and that's not enough to win. Really, she couldn't have done much more. So I don't have any problem with giving it to her. I really think the 2 world records by Muhammad is ridiculous, including the World Championship final, but I also don't mind giving it to Kosgei.
With Kosgei also, like, Paula didn't have those shoes. So do we take a minute and a half off? And then she wouldn't have the record. So I think there's that. With any world record, obviously, just the nature of the sport, you're going to question, is it clean? But that's for everyone, even Hassan, who didn't break a record. Well, what's wrong with Hassan, John? She's the 10-15 double crushing everybody like that. Nobody thought that was possible.
I don't have a problem giving it to Hassan either. She not only the 10-15 double, the way she did it, closing a final 1600 of the 10K in 4:17, and then coming back and running 3:51 from the front in the 15. Again, any of those 3 winning it, maybe they should just split the award 3 ways because those were 3 of the most incredible seasons I've ever seen.
I kind of feel like it's splitting between who's better, Shalane, Flanagan, or Dina Castor. It's very hard to figure out. Yes, I hate when they split awards, but in this case, it might be warranted.
Guys, I think we might need to have a new award. This would be obviously the premier award in the sport once you hear what I propose. The Let'sRun.com Person of the Year. Kind of like, Time Magazine has its Person of the Year. What do you guys think?
Well, I think the thing is, the Time Person of the Year, that's not like the MVP of the world. It's sort of the person who had the most impact. So we've seen past winners. Donald Trump has won. Vladimir Putin has won. It's not always about, it's not, I wouldn't say it's necessarily the most prestigious award. So it's kind of interesting, like, who do you think the winner should be this year?
Oh, John, that was kind of a perfect setup. I was like, would Alberto be our winner this year?
He's certainly got some strong consideration. He coached Sifan Hassan to this ridiculous double at Worlds, an incredible season, and he also got banned from the sport for 4 years. So I think he merits strong consideration for Let's Run Person of the Year.
Or do we give it to the person who's like generated the most traffic for Let's Run in the year? This could be very difficult. Everyone, we might have to start implementing a tip jar for Let's Run. With Alberto banned for 4 years, traffic and page views could really, really, really decline.
Someone needs to cut the New York City Marathon and cheat there, and that would start a thread, and that's your easy way to become Let's Run Person of the Year. Figure out a creative way to cut the course at New York City Marathon.
Yeah, the cheating threads are ridiculously over the top. It's crazy how popular those are.
I keep meaning to run the Lehigh Valley Marathon at the same time as Mike Rossi. I forget to do it. But while y'all are talking about Alberto and all of that, Walden mentioned Paula Radcliffe. There was one thing I wanted to bring up. And we talked a little bit about China last week, and this is actually from an article I found on that Chinese situation by Ethan Strauss in The Athletic. It's a great quote from Upton Sinclair, folks. I just want to, American writer back in the day, just share a great quote. I love it with everyone. It's my favorite quote of the last month. It is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it. So I think that applies to so many people here. This is why Craig Masbach cannot be commenting on this stuff. This is why I actually think Paul was right. There's been no proof that these athletes were dopers. So I think she's fine for saying that, but it is sort of conflicting to have them talking about that. And I don't want to get into the China Twitter thing again, but one thing we didn't mention last week, which is very important, Twitter is actually banned in China. So the fact that all these Chinese were supposedly outraged by this tweet, which they didn't even see, is absurd. It was all fake news.
I mean, you don't think the Chinese government can access Twitter? I'm pretty sure they can see that if they want. Those are the people who'd be upset. It's not like the Chinese citizenry were revolting about this thing. But actually, so we talked about Bridget Kosgei a little bit. I want to bring this up because this was just sort of a strange episode from earlier this week. And it concerned Bridget Kosgei in a press conference that they had at the Athletics Kenya headquarters in Nairobi. And they brought in Bridget and they brought in her coach, Eric Kamayo. And Coach Kamayo, he had a quote in there. He was talking about like saying how she's been tested and that sort of thing. And this is the quote from the article from the Daily Nation. Bridget was tested 6 times before the Chicago Marathon and before that 8 times ahead of London Marathon. She will never dodge a test. There are 3 times the anti-doping officials did not test her, and they made a big deal out of it, yet she was sick or had left the training venue when they arrived. Let them test her to the last minute. We are ready for the tests. And I read this, and I was like, I couldn't believe it. I was just like, did her coach just admit that she missed 3 tests? And like being sick, I've never really heard that as an excuse for not being able to take a test. Like Christian Coleman, when he had left his training venue or he wasn't there, he got whereabouts failures. I was just, there was so much about this I didn't understand. I was kind of curious why it wasn't followed up on. And then Justin Horniker, who's an American running writer, he followed up with Federico Rosa, reached out to Federico, and this was the explanation from the Rosas. And he said, I think something was lost in translation. Missing 3 tests in 1 year is a clear violation of anti-doping rules. Even if this is a very serious and private issue and I should not disclose any information, just to stop any rumors around the matter, Bridget in the last 12 months has 1 missed test around December 2018 or early January 2019. So this whole thing was just sort of confusing to me. And I think I'd still like some clarification. I reached out to the Anti-Doping Agency of Kenya. They have not gotten back to me at all. I don't know. I know there were questions about her already based on the time. And I don't want to say like, if she didn't miss any tests, then I don't want to accuse her of that. But her coach's comments were a bit troubling to me.
Clearly, if it was 3 official missed tests, she would be banned. I think they would enforce that. I mean, the Coleman thing, the technicalities, the rules, but whatever, 3 tests in a year, you're gone. So I don't know exactly what that means. Maybe we could reach out to World Marathon Majors as well, because they're in charge of some, or maybe they just pay for some of the heightened testing. But I tend to believe or trust the anti-doping authorities. They generally do a good thing. Maybe some of that's misguided because like, I would assume like a whole doping lab in Russia couldn't be covering stuff up, that they would catch something like that. But clearly shit goes on. So who knows what to think of it.
To me, 1 missed test is huge. 2, even huger. And 3 is obviously a ban. But if I was doping, I would purposely miss a test. But it's kind of hard because you wouldn't go out in public, right? Because you're supposed to be a certain place. You'd have to avoid the place you're supposed to be that day. But, you know, John, I encourage you to get to the bottom of this.
Yeah, I'm going to try to keep doing some digging on it. What I found weird, though, is if she actually did have 3 missed tests, why would her coach come out and say this at some press conference? It doesn't make any sense. So I don't know if he was misquoted or what, but there's some confusion. And it seems like Federico Rosa has tried to set the record straight here, and he's saying she has 1 official missed test. But yeah, I think I'd love to hear the athletics, the Anti-Doping Agency of Kenya. I'd like to hear their explanation as well.
Yeah, I think some of it's a little bit being lost in translation. I actually am encouraged by the fact that they said that the anti-doping authorities made a big deal of it, because the reality is people talk about 3 missed tests. You're not allowed to have any missed tests. Like if the drug testers are there and they see you, you have to take the test.
But that's different. That's refusing to provide a sample versus a missed test.
Well, I know. I think a lot of people don't understand this. Like if you're there and they see you and you miss a test, that's it. Now you could theoretically just hide out in your house all day as long as they don't see you through the window. then that's just like missing a test. It's not refusing a test. So they should be, you indicate where you're supposed to be and you're supposed to be there. So it should be a big deal if you miss one.
Speaking of doping, guys, I think we need a sponsors plug, but I'm not sure what you guys think of this. I need a ruling from the Let'sRun.com nation. Got an email here. I'm the manager of the website steroids.ws. We'd be interested in one or more of the banner ads on your forums. What are the prices, banner sizes, and payment methods? Thank you. So should we make steroids.ws a sponsor of the website?
Well, as hilarious as I think it would be, I've got to vote no on this one, given our fairly firm anti-doping stance.
I'm all for it if the price is right. The other day I was on Let's Run and there was an ad. Did y'all get this ad? Actually, this might reveal something about my Google search history. It was for manscaping. It was like an electric razor.
Yeah, I mean, that probably has more to do with you than me, Robert, because I haven't seen that ad anywhere.
The ad tracking is weird. I swear to God, I got to Doha and I saw an ad for Ashley Madison. And I'm like, well, this is weird. I told my wife that. She kind of laughed. But I'm like, does it know like I'm thousands of miles from home?
Probably, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're in a hotel. Okay, do we want to talk? I guess I'll ask you guys, do you have any interest in talking about NCAA cross country, given that we just had two of the biggest meets of the regular season, the Nutty Comb Invitational at Wisconsin, pre-nats at Indiana State? Shall we talk about that for a second? The enthusiasm is overwhelming, but I shall move forward nonetheless. So what we got basically, what we kind of got a confirmation of what we already knew. The Northern Arizona men, they are the favorites. They stomped everyone at Wisconsin. They look on track for a fourth consecutive NCAA title, which is just incredible. And then on the women's side, Arkansas is actually, this is sort of the big story on the women's side, is Arkansas is trying to go for the calendar year Triple Crown. They already won the indoor and outdoor titles in track and field. They have never won the women's cross-country title. And last 2 years, they've essentially just choked in NCAAs. They've run really, really poorly. But at Nutty Comb, they were very impressive. They crushed the field. In that race, they had 4 women in the top 10, scored just 62 points. Stanford was second with 98 points. So those are sort of the two big team takeaways. And I guess individually, the winners at Wisconsin were Edwin Kurgard of Iowa State. He was third place last year at NCAAs. And Alicia Monson of Wisconsin, she was fourth in NCAAs last year, the NCAA Indoor 5,000 champion. They were the individual champions. And then BYU had a good day at pre-nats. They won 3 of the 4. They won the women's individual, men's individual, men's team. They've second in the women's team race. So that was a big weekend for them. But I guess here's the thing I thought was really weird about this. So the NCAA, the USTF CCCA, the Coaches Association, has a national coaches poll. And every week this year, there has been one voter who has voted the Stanford men number 1. Every other week, NAU has had 10 of the 11 first place votes. NAU has beaten Stanford twice, including this past weekend. They smoked them at Wisconsin. Yet Stanford continues to get one first place vote in the coaches poll. And it totally baffles me. I don't understand it.
Doesn't baffle me. It's probably the NAU coach voting.
No, because I was told, Dennis Young pointed this out on Twitter. He said, you can vote for yourself. You can vote for your own team.
Well, he doesn't want to vote for himself.
Maybe I need to reach out to Mike Smith and get to the bottom of this, because if that's not the explanation, I want an explanation.
I kind of like it. It's like not giving these unanimous Hall of Fame votes to the baseball players. John, you were factually incorrect about one thing, though. You said NAU looks poised to win their what? This would be their 4th in a row?
Yeah.
To me, they look poised to win like 5 or 6 in a row. Have you seen the years of their runners? So their top runner, junior. Their second runner, Jordy Bemis, senior. But the next 3 runners in the top 5, freshman. That's pretty crazy. Then sophomore, junior. So not only are they going to win 4 in a row, they could win 5 or 6. So maybe we should hope that Stanford wins just to have something different happen. But and it's for the Arkansas women. They've been running amazing, and I think even stronger than the years past. But I have absolutely no faith in them and their ability to get the job done at NCAAs, given what they've done in so many times in the past, just completely choking. It doesn't. I remember when I was in college and stuff, I used to it was harder to follow cross country. You didn't follow on a weekly basis like you do now. I remember going to NCAAs a couple times and thinking there's no way the Arkansas men do win this year again, and they would win. The Arkansas women to me are like the opposite of that. I always think, oh, they're going to finally do well this year, and then they don't do well. So maybe they get over the hump with a win. That would be kind of a cool story, but there's no reason to have faith in that.
Have they ever been favored to win?
No, they were considered a contender for the crown last year, but they underperformed severely the last 2 years. And I think if it's cold in Terre Haute, that could be a problem. But I urge them, find a transcript of this podcast, or better yet, hire someone to transcribe it, print it out, and post it to your bulletin board, because Robert Johnson is officially an Arkansas hater. He has doubted you guys. Be interesting if you can prove him wrong. I don't root for anyone, but you've got a hater now.
I mean, NAU, I feel a little pride, little Flagstaff. When I moved out there, nobody trained out there. NAU was like the scrappy school that finished like 3rd or 4th at nationals, and you get all excited. But now, John, they're a powerhouse, and the whole world trains out there. Shout out to Flagstaff and all the pioneers who are out there. I'm taking credit. But I think I deserve 50% credit.
I don't think John's necessarily right. I'm not a hater of Arkansas. I mean, Taylor Werner, I was so impressed with her in Austin, John, when she came back and doubled back, in the 5,000 in the middle of the heat and got, second?
Yeah, second to Danny Jones.
And if you look at their squad, I mean, I've always said this is the case on the men's side. It really helps to have older distance runners. I mean, obviously the NAU men this year, they're proving that not to be the case. Sometimes women get worse as they get older, but look at they've got a seasoned squad for Arkansas: senior, junior. 4 women in the top 9, very impressive. But John, are you confident now that the American winless streak on the individual side continues?
I mean, I'm not totally confident, but I think it's hard to argue against Edwin Kurgat as the favorite individually. Just he was dominant. He pulled away with 2K to go and won pretty comfortably. All I've heard from the Iowa State, when I spoke to Jeremy Sudbury, he's their assistant coach earlier this year. He's like, yeah, he's better than last year. He's more prepared for it. He has a winning mentality. I mean, outdoors on the track, he could have run the 10K. He would have been a contender to win that race. Instead, he wanted to run the 5K because he's like, look, that's what Morgan McDonald and Grant Fisher are running. I want to test myself against them and need to improve my kick. So I really respect that. He's the top returner from last year. I do think it's his race to lose, but we've seen bigger favorites than him lose in the past. I mean, look at Edward Cheserek in 2016. Everyone thought he was going to win, and Patrick Tiernan upset him. So I want to give some respect. Connor Mance of BYU, he's undefeated so far this year. He was top 10 last year as a redshirt freshman. Now, granted, he was a little older than usual as a redshirt freshman because he took his mission at BYU, but he's running fantastic. He got another win at pre-nat, so he's probably America's best bet for a contender. Joe Klecker is also of Colorado. He didn't have I don't think he raced to his full ability at pre-nats, but he's a guy who could be a contender. He's shown flashes, especially indoors last season. But yeah, I think Kurgat has to be the favorite on the men's side.
We've talked NCAA cross country. We've talked Amsterdam in terms of limited career, but we haven't talked about guys who's actually 2 things that I'm kind of surprised about. We haven't talked about who actually won these races. Leonard Career was 11th, both in Amsterdam and in Toronto last week. We had 4 men break 2:05:30 in both races. I mean, that's how crazy the world of marathoning is. These are quote unquote not Abbott Marathon majors, but you had 8 men in 2 races break 2:05:30. I think the Canadian all-comers record fell. I think it's now 2:05 flat in Canada. But that race also served as the Canadian Olympic trials, which was interesting to me. The first time since 1984 that Canada had Olympic trials. And rags to riches stories, huge PRs. Trevor Hofbauer wins the men's trials in 2:09:51, and Dana Pidhoresk wins the women's in 2:29:05. They both ran 6 or 7 minute PRs, which was crazy and very impressive.
Dana Pidereski. I think that's how it's pronounced, actually.
So instead of talking about Phil Monrono, who runs 2:05, we're going to talk about Trevor Hofbauer, right? That's what you're saying, Robert?
Well, I wanted to shout out Phil Monrono and talk about that, yes, but it's more interesting to me. I don't know why, but it just is. And I thought it was weird that they put the trials in the middle of this bigger race. If you're going to bother to have a trials, why wouldn't you just have its own thing like the Americans? And the weird thing is, I was thinking this, in America, so many people focus their post-collegiate career on trying to make the trials. And there's how many people? Probably 200 women are about to make it and over 100 men. Do we have the numbers right now? Can someone look those up?
Way more than that.
Oh, it's like I think it's 400 women at this point, probably over 200 men.
No. Anyway.
Yes. Oh, Robert, the standard's 245. Like everyone's qualifying this year. It's ridiculous. I'll look it up, but I think the qualifiers at this point, it's probably over 400.
And there's the new shoes, guys. Come on, who are we kidding?
Why is the standard 245 again? Because that's not the Olympic standard. We used to have the rule that
because it was the Olympic standard in 2016 was 245, and the rules were that they couldn't have a standard that was more difficult than the Olympic standard. So they kept that, and then late in the process, the IAAF changed the qualifying system, and they weren't going to change the standards.
I'm just interested in the psychology of this. So in America, you have to qualify, and we have hundreds of people doing it. Obviously, America is a much bigger country than Canada. But the interesting thing was, in Canada, anyone could, I guess, just pay your entry fee, right? You're in the Canadian Olympic trials. And yet there were only 7 women in Canada, or actually only 6 women in Canada that broke 245 in that race. So I wonder how many women even entered the race. It's fascinating to me.
Here are the qualifiers. Qualified men, U.S. Olympic trials, 199. Qualified women, 383. So those standards are obviously going to come down in 2024 because the Olympic standards have changed. But Robert, here's the other thing. The Canadian Olympic trials, only the top Canadian finisher was guaranteed a spot on the team. I mean, we've seen this, like London Marathon's done this for some of their races.
I read that they were going to honor the top 3. If they're in line to go to the Olympics because they have the standard, or if they have the world ranking, they will get to go to the Olympics. So you want to just make sure you're top 3, and then you get to go to the Olympics.
Oh, what I read is only top 1 was guaranteed to not get bumped, as long as they had the standard. So I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, Trevor Hoffbauer, 209 PB to finish as the top Canadian from 216 at age 27. So that's pretty crazy. He posted a blog post about this called Keep Showing Up, where he was sort of explaining, well, he'd made some progression, but not everything had come together for him. One of his target half marathons had been canceled due to wildfires, and his marathon this spring, he ran 216, but he was thinking he could have run 213. So he didn't think it was as big, personally, he was like, this isn't as big a jump as I thought it was, as people thought it was. But still, on paper, people look at it and it's like, that's ridiculous. Also, can we give a shout out? Phil Monrono, I know we gave him credit for winning the race. He has maybe my favorite nickname in all of running. His nickname is Baby Police because he has a baby face and he works for the Kenyan police. So I just think it's awesome. Whenever that guy does well, it's just like the best nickname in the running world. And he trains with Kipchoge too.
Well, we need to bring back the Dreams Become Reality Runner of the Week. And Trevor Hoffbauer is mine for sure. I mean, his story's very cool. 216 to 209, that just isn't done. In his blog post, he tries to explain it. And a lot of it sort of makes sense to me. Also, the guy quit training with a watch. And when I made a huge breakthrough in running, I essentially moved to Flagstaff, and I had to quit running off of pace, off of artificial time, and run off how I felt. And Robert was getting into how you make the Canadian Olympic team. And I thought he was essentially going to say, well, the winner was guaranteed. So maybe Hoffbauer, otherwise, I don't know how the second and third guy get picked for the Canadian team, but maybe he thought look, the only way I can make it from this race is I have to be the first guy. So I'm just going to go for it. And it's just a different type of mindset. Essentially he's like, well, I got to run 209. Otherwise there's no shot of making the Olympics. And that he made that his goal. And obviously not that anyone else can do this. And I mean, he tries to explain how he's now a 209 guy. And it's like, wow, this is crazy. And I started a thread who, what, how did this guy become what he is? And people were like, oh, you're trying to imply doping. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm just obviously anyone does that. You'd think about that. That's the greatest compliment you can get in the sport is that people think you're doping. That's the greatest compliment you can get.
Oh yeah.
When I went from 29.49 to 28.27 for 10K, I mean, that's not big a jump as this, I don't think. People are like, wow, he must be doping. I'm like, holy shit, someone thinks I'm doping? This is great. He believed in himself. The watch, that sort of stuff. Yeah, fine. If it came out 5 years down the road, he was doping. Well, then you would evaluate it differently. But there's no reason to think that. I mean, obviously, anyone it's just the nature of sport. You're going to think about that, and that's the greatest compliment you can get in the sport is somebody thinks you're doping.
I think I kind of joke that you haven't made it as a runner until someone accuses you of doping on the Let's Run message board, and that's just the way it is. There are always going to be people who are suspicious based on performance, but. One other thing, have you guys seen this guy? He's 6'3". I don't know how much he weighs, but he's got to be one of the heaviest sub 210 marathoners ever. I mean, he used to play basketball growing up. I couldn't believe when I looked at this guy, like, this guy's a marathoner. He's the Canadian champion.
Exactly, John. I was just about to go there with that. I think obviously the shoes helped him. I mean, like that's the thing, like a minute or two, but like severely reducing the pounding, that's going to help a much bigger guy, I assume. Obviously, I'm no scientist. I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night either. So, but I think, a 209 now might have been what 210 or 211 once was, which would still be a fabulous run for this guy. I mean, his half marathon PR is 104.30. But as he said, look, I was like a 103 guy, and like when my 10K PR was officially 29.50, I was really like more like a 29-minute guy, I thought. So great run by him. He's my dreams become reality athlete. I'll let you guys jump on that bandwagon as well if you want him.
Since Bolton's mad that I didn't actually talk about the winners of the race, he's talked about Phil Monrono winning his third Toronto men's title, Magdalena Masai Robertson, the wife of, is it Zane or which one is it, John?
Jake Robertson.
Jake Robertson was the winner of the women's race in Toronto in 2:22.16, which was a Canadian all-comers record by 1 second. So she won $80,000, which will go a long way in Canada. And then in Amsterdam, for the record, Vincent Kipchumba, 2:05.09, won the men's race. And 20-year-old Ethiopian Dejitu Asmara ran 2:19.26. Also, Tijit Jerma of Ethiopia, who's young as well, ran 2:19.52. I mean, Ethiopia is quite deep in the women's marathon these days.
All right, guys, there is a topic I want to address. I think this is very interesting. I was talking about this with my roommate at pub trivia last night, and he's a triple jumper. And he was talking about Zion Williamson, because Zion Williamson, the star rookie for the New Orleans Pelicans, and he's out for a few weeks now with a knee injury, and it's a torn meniscus. He's out for 6 to 8 weeks. And he was saying, like, there's been speculation among jumpers for months, ever since they were watching him compete in college. They were saying essentially, like, this guy is too big, he's too heavy and too explosive for him not to have knee issues, like, going forward. Because they know when you're pushing off on the runway, you're creating, it's a very explosive movement. You're putting a lot of pressure on your joints and everything. And he was saying, like, people like Marquise Dendy, the former world indoor champion in the long jump, and my roommate himself, and then I think some of his other jumping community people, they were all saying, like, this isn't sustainable. This guy's body composition, you can't be that heavy and that explosive without putting too much torque. His knees are going to be shot, and they're all doubting his NBA potential. And I just thought this was really interesting that people from other sports, they're sort of used to these movements, and they can sort of see, like, yeah, this isn't going to work out. I'm not saying that Zion Williamson is going to be a flop, but I was intrigued by this whole line of thinking that because, jumpers have this experience of all these explosive movements, and they thought, he wasn't going to be able to do it he wasn't going to make it through his career without getting injured because he's putting so much stress on his knees.
Is Zion, I don't know, a lot of NBA guys jump and dunk, right? So, like, is Zion just considered to be bigger, more explosive? I mean, I think he's kind of both those things, right? Like, what would you...
So, the special circumstances around Zion is that he is particularly explosive. Like, his jumping ability is like one of the things he's known for. He's famous. It's one of his biggest assets. And he's also, for his frame, he's only 6'7", but he's 280 pounds, which is, it's a lot of, I'm not saying he's fat or anything, but it's a lot of muscle and mass on that frame. So you combine those things, like LeBron James I think LeBron was probably around 280 at his peak as well, but he's a few inches taller than Williamson. And I think that's one of the incredible things is LeBron is very explosive and has made it through. He's 1 inch taller, but I think he's lighter at this point. LeBron's made it through his career almost injury-free, which is remarkable. But when I just was fascinated, they were all saying, like, yeah, this guy, he's going to get hurt. You just can't put that much strain and torque on your muscles at 6'7", 280. I think it's going to be very interesting. I love watching him play basketball, but I was fascinated by the theorizing behind this.
Plus, I heard he was overweight coming into training camp. So I think that's an issue. John, I'm fascinated by your roommate. You live with a triple jumper. Like, how good was this guy? Does he go to, like, triple jump websites every day to see what's going on? Like, does he pay for NBC Gold? Like, how does he follow the sport, or does he? Like, does he think of himself as a triple jumper in the same way that we might think of ourselves as runners?
Oh, totally. Yeah. He's big. Like his goal is to make the Olympic trials this year. And
Does he have a name, or does he want to be anonymous, John?
I don't know. I'll have to ask him. We'll keep him anonymous for now.
We should sponsor him.
He's not like an elite trip. He's not like he didn't make. I think he competed at USA Indoors this year, actually. So you
don't know if your roommate was at USA Indoors. I mean, that you yourself.
No, he was. He was at USA Indoors. I know that. I'm saying I don't think he was at USA Outdoors, but I don't want to out him at the moment.
But what do you mean, John? You were at USA Outdoors. You wouldn't realize if he was there, like
he wasn't there. No, I mean I wasn't watching the triple jump closely.
But wouldn't you know if your roommate was at the same meet as you? Like, do you guys not talk to each other? Like, this seems weird to me.
Well, we weren't on the same flight or anything. He wasn't there. He wasn't at USA Outdoors. I know that.
Wow. Do we need to pay some counseling in the house or something?
No, we're fine. I said we played trivia last night.
This is fascinating. I feel like kind of Mark Parker, like with the Penn State guys. Like I want to know about this other world, Like Mark Parker wanted to hang with the big boys at Penn State, and I'm like, wow, triple jumper. I can find out the details. Like, if he wants to talk about basketball world and like the knees blowing out and putting topical male hormone in places. Like, oh, I'm almost for it.
Well, you just love that topical male hormone phrase, don't you, Weldon?
I don't know. I just thought it was really weird. And that was like in Doha at 5:30 in the morning when I was catching my flight after being up for a week straight pretty much. And this phrase stuck in my head. I'm like, this is really weird. I want to get to the bottom of this. Just ask what people think. And now I finally have an answer 2 weeks later, so I feel good about it. But guys, do you have how about what deleted thread of the week before we go?
Hit us with it.
A lot of spam this week, but I think I found one that's interesting. This is just more interesting. Why won't New York get rid of the mafia? And maybe you're thinking I'm too New York centric now. I praised Sheelane as the GOAT or as the GOAT with the masses because she won New York. And now I'm curious, why won't New York get rid of the mafia? I feel like the mafia has a much smaller influence than it has, so you're going to have corruption anywhere. Like, I don't know if it's a fair question, but yeah, you still hear in the news, like the mafia guy, they all live in Long Island, I feel like. I mean, on Staten Island. And like one of the mafia guys got murdered by some crazy, it wasn't even like a mafia hit. But they all know they're mafia. I'm like, well, if you all know they're mafia, can't nowadays like look at their bank accounts or something, shut that shit down more often. Maybe I shouldn't say anything. I'm still in New York. The mafia might come after me. They can figure out where I live and shit.
I mean, it's the same case. I'm sure that... Have they not seen mafia movies? I mean, watch Godfather 2. Why couldn't they convict Michael Corleone? Like, it's hard to convict someone of crimes without evidence. And the whole thing of the mafia is they don't let a lot of this evidence get out. So, or they don't have people talking. So, well, yeah, why does the mafia still exist? Because you can't just put someone in prison because you're convinced that they're in the mafia. You need actual hard evidence.
Could we blame Mark Zuckerberg? I was thinking about this the other day with like end-to-end encryption with like WhatsApp. Like, can drug dealers just stand on the street now and just text each other like right across the street? Like the deals, like nobody can access those phones. It's end-to-end encryption.
Oh, Robert, you need to watch The Wire. As a Baltimore resident, watch the whole premise of The Wire is based on this whole concept.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. Back then they could tap the phone line. They can't tap a WhatsApp. It's encrypted. That's what I'm saying. I was actually thinking of it in terms of how things have changed since The Wire.
Actually, I was on a run with someone, and they were telling me that one of the reasons murder rates, everyone says murder rates are way down because of better policing and the broken windows theory and all that stuff. And they were saying that cell phones are a major reason. It used to be you to have like a drug den to sell drugs, and now then with cell phones, it made it just easier to sort of in pagers, same thing. So maybe the pagers goes back a while, but like essentially like the runner could bring the drugs to you, so they didn't have to be in one concentrated place. Turf battles became less important. So maybe we're onto something. Okay, do we need a new topic? I think we might be done. But Robert, I swear at the end of last week's podcast said that the Lisbon something was this week, and that's what we'll be talking about all month. Robert, have we discussed that?
No, we have not. Lisbon was actually last week. There were, I just knew that there were some big races. Lisbon, for the record, Titus Ikuri of Kenya won the half marathon in 60:12.
Titus, come on, that's how that name is pronounced, Robert.
John's very upset with my pronunciation. Course record.
Why would you think it's pronounced Titus? It's Titus. Titus is a name.
Perez Chipchachir has won the women's race in a 66:54 course record. That's for the half. There was actually course records in the marathons as well. Andulam Bele of Ethiopia has won in 2:06 flat, and Chale Dalasa Adugda of Ethiopia is won in 2:29.51. So I apologize for not getting those at the top of the show.
Yeah, what's happening next? Robert, you got to give me what are the low-key road races that we need to talk about next week?
Well, this weekend, according to Race Results Weekly, we have the Heroes Run Half Marathon. I'm not sure where that is. The Military World Games and the Minova Frankfurt Marathon. So Frankfurt is actually a decent marathon, but not as much to recap this weekend. It'll be a light week and NCAA cross country.
Well, actually, one thing I wanted to talk about real quick, the Diamond League, they came out. There's all this talk about the downgrading the Diamond League. The Diamond League has actually added a meet. So they've subbed in Gateshead for Birmingham while the Birmingham Stadium is redone for the 2022 Commonwealth Games. China is getting a second Diamond League. They're starting the season in Doha on April 17th. I mean, their schedule is kind of ridiculous. They start the season in Doha on April 17th, and then there's no meet for over 3 weeks until the second meet, which is the China meet, where we don't know it's going to be May 10th, and then you have Shanghai May 16th. You got a pretty interesting stretch in the middle of the season. You have Eugene, which is the pre-classic. The first, there's the Pac-12s, and then there's the first major meet at the new Hayward Field, June 7th in Eugene. And then the next week in Austin is the NCAAs. And then the week after that, you have the Olympic trials back in Eugene. So that month of June 2020 is going to be a phenomenal month for American track fans. And then you have the one final in Zurich at the end of the season on September 11th. And then Stockholm still has a meet. I'm confused. Stockholm said they were losing their Diamond League, but they still have one on May 24th. So some interesting things coming out with the new IAF Diamond League schedule.
Yeah, it's interesting that, I think they have a big Chinese sponsor, right? Wanda or something?
Yes.
So it makes sense they're going to China. Everyone's going to China because of the money. The sport needs more money. That's a good thing. We went to Doha for the money, but I don't think we actually got more money, which isn't a good thing. But now, we've been discussing China on the podcasts. We talked about going to more Diamond League events. Are we going to be banned from going to China?
Well, I wanted to. I thought the China talk. I wasn't really prepared to talk about it last week. I've been actually reading up a lot on it. I highly recommend the Exponent podcast with Ben Thompson or his Checkery blog about it. But it's pretty interesting in the fact of what they were trying to do with the NBA. Is again, Twitter is banned in China. A guy makes a comment on Twitter, and the Chinese want him fired for what he's saying in America about their country. Like their idea that our free speech doesn't even exist in our own country is pretty a bold statement. And these people, one of whom lives in Taiwan, he used to sort of have a different take, but they're wondering if we should even bother doing business with a country like this, because it's kind of interesting. Bill Clinton, in the late 90s, they thought when we went into, they laughed. Like the idea was we would go to do business with China. They're going to see the Western ways. It's going to open up. They're going to get the internet. There's no way they can clamp down on freedom. Like it'll naturally, the world gets free and freer and freer. But people don't realize technology, we're talking about the mafia and stuff. Technology has actually made it much easier to clamp down on it. Think about East Germany. For them, the Stasi police to know what people were saying and who was for and against the government, they had to employ thousands of spies, tens of thousands of people. With China now, thanks to Cisco building out the firewall, they know what everybody's thinking. They can ban everything instantly on your phone and your computer. And it's pretty crazy. Like it's easier for them to clamp down now than it would have been, say, the pre-internet era.
They have the technology that Bruce Wayne uses at the end of The Dark Knight to locate the Joker. Yeah, making the mainstream. All right, I think this podcast has gone off the rails. Maybe Robert needs his own China weekly spin-off podcast. He seems more informed on this issue than last week. But otherwise, I think we're pretty much good for this week. Well then, let's take us home here.
Yes, we're 11 days away from the New York City Marathon. So we'll have plenty to talk about next week, guys.
Yes, the New York City Marathon, whoever wins is the greatest runner of all time. So a lot on the line there.
You're seeing the subway signs on the buses. New York's getting ready. All of New York weeps at the retirement of Sheelane Flanagan today.
That means we're only 9 days away from the Ivy League Heptagonal Championships. Where Princeton, we're going for another title. Dartmouth hasn't won in probably 10 years, and Yale has never won.
John, I just looked it up. Yale did beat Dartmouth at the pre-nationals. Does that mean we're a contender? We were like 22nd place.
We lost to Yale?
Yes, that means we're good.
Oh my God.
Are we good?
This is No, that's a bad sign for Dartmouth. We shouldn't be losing to Yale in anything, except maybe hockey and lacrosse.
Yale beat Harvard early in the year. Don't forget that. I figured 22nd means we're probably not a contender. But the Yale guys do like Trevor Hoffbauer. Remember, early in the season, I said just trust yourself. Do what you can do. Trevor Hoffbauer, just emulate that guy. Quit wearing your watches. Just pull a Hoffbauer.
I still believe in Dartmouth. We'll get revenge at the Heps.